How are you?
Good to see you. I think this might be one of the first times I've seen you.
Yeah, it's probably true. I joined a uh, something right after I joined the group, and then otherwise, kind of
Yeah.
been a nightmare for me. So
No, I can imagine. I hope things are going okay. Not too chaotic. Well, probably chaotic enough.
chaotic enough is probably the appropriate
Definitely.
description. Yeah,
Yeah. How are you? I see you got the office behind you.
yeah, in a big empty office. It's how I live my life these days.
Only one that goes in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Is
One of
that your
very few.
day job office?
Yeah,
Yeah. What is it? So what is it that you do?
I'm a consultant. I do product design consulting with
Yeah.
a large IT consulting company.
Yeah, very cool. I too used to be a consultant. It's definitely an
Yeah,
interesting field to be
yeah,
in.
it's got its pros and cons. It's I feel a different way about it every 4 months or so. It seems to be a rhythm, you know what I mean, where I just have to remind myself it's the season of feeling this way, and
Very much. We had just had two a merge between two of the biggest consulting companies where I am at the moment, and
is that right?
so it's kind of just two big consulting companies mostly now. That's about it. It's just those two,
Yeah.
Deloitte and a new company called Synergy, which is quite interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting game. My friend's in consultant. He also goes through the waves of feeling like, oh, this is a terrible time to be a consultant.
Yeah. Yeah.
To like, oh, I don't mind what we're doing. Paulina, Anna, welcome. Thank you for dropping in.
Hi.
Hey.
The interface for Butters changed, and I'm like, ooh, this looks different. I don't know if I like it or not. Everything's on the sidebar now. It's all a bit smaller. I guess it makes sense. Torfik, welcome.
Hello, hi Ben, hi everyone. Sorry, I am listening on the side, having my dinner along with you guys. I'm not alone.
That's completely okay. Please enjoy your dinner. I hope it's something good.
Thanks.
Okay. Can you guys hear my music? Just cool. You can hear the jazz playing in the background.
Yep.
Awesome. Just making sure that's working. Okay, so today, the past few weeks, this has been one of our side experimental events, and we've progressively been working our way up to building a complete portfolio. So, just for some context, I need to build my portfolio, and it's been a long time since I've needed to do that. I've been requested to send one through very recently, and I'm like, well, I can, but it's going to take me at least 7 to 8 days because I'm making this with people on a call. So these portfolio live events have been me making my portfolio and talking out loud around the thinking that I do going through it. We have all of our other workshops that are for building portfolios, but we thought this was a good opportunity to kind of do zero prep beforehand and see what it's really like under the hood. And I think along the way, we've been finding some really interesting questions and also found some areas that might be useful for the community in the future that we can expand upon or put some structure around. So let me just check. So someone dropped something in the chat. Don't worry, Paulina, you're also cooking. Please cook well. One of my favorite things to do. So today, last session, we started the portfolio deck, and I'll do a recap of that in a second. And our goal today is to have a draft that I can send. So I've been told I need to send it to them for a remote hiring position that I applied for kind of for fun, really. I hear my definition of fun is very different from everyone's definition of fun, but the goal today is hopefully to have something that I can be like, hey, this isn't great, but it's good enough. So let's do a quick recap of where we're at and kind of where we've come from the full journey. So I'll open up the Figma plan. Okay, let's find our Figma file. That's not the Figma file. Okay. Please load Figma. That would be great. Maybe I need to quit out of everything. Nope, gonna have to quit out of Figma. Always the tech troubles to start the day. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Resume. I put it in a very great place, which is non-organized in my drafts. We're just going to Google this. There it is. Oh yeah, this is our working file. Let's do a bit of a recap. So the very first few sessions, we worked on developing this resume. I actually submitted this to one of my friends who runs a consultancy or an agency as well. And whilst it's good for it, this is kind of more targeted towards a startup. So one of the future things that I'm going to have to do is break this into 3 versions of this resume and tailor each of these roles to kind of target specific roles. Now, we might do that on a call or we might not. I might just check in with you guys at the end of this on whether you would like to see that process. But we do have the draft here, and really it's just a matter of choosing the different roles that I've got that target and trying to find the core dot points here that more of meet the role requirements for specific roles like senior designer or facilitator, or in some cases, different kinds of consulting roles as well. But today we're working on this. So last session, we busted out our capabilities deck template from the Portfolio Operating System's perfect slide deck template. If you haven't seen those, you do have access to them. If you need a link to them, let me know, but it's also in the community. So we used the template to kind of just fill in a few blanks and get a rough structure. We filled in the front page. So we just added a picture of me and the name. We tried to have a go at the how I got here, which quite unsatisfied with it, but it is something. Did a brief go at the more about me to just give a little bit of extra personality to it. We then focused on just getting together what are the core case studies we're going to have. We're going to have, we did a very quick storyboarding for my core day job, my latest case study, which is a design system and senior designer project that I did. So we used our storyboarding template here. Then we also mapped out kind of the 2 extra supporting case studies that aren't as good, but are more there to kind of support the roles that we're targeting. So we had my consulting role. We then had another for apprentices. Now these titles, images, we haven't filled any of those in, but we're more of laying the groundwork. We also then had I had a bit of a desire to show extracurricular work on top of that, like writing and a ton of other stuff that just not directly related, but maybe shows specific skills. So we chucked a slide in to reserve a spot for that afterwards. That's cool and all, but for today, what we need to focus on is the hero case study. That's going to be our most important area and our introduction. So if possible, I would like to revamp the introduction. I think I've got some ideas behind that, assuming I can remember what they are. But we'll focus on getting that hero case study. That way, even if we don't show a very good onboarding here or a very good introduction, we can at least show our most recent work. Okay, so that's a goal for today. We're going to use this to kind of map out these 6 here. And see if we can put together a really rough draft. And I'm going to try and walk and talk my way through that. But before we get to that, I just want to stop and check if there's any questions. I'll see if there's anyone I got to let into the room. There is one. That would be the lovely CJ. Does anyone have any questions about this? Is anything that comes to mind, or is this a good approach for today? Thumbs up if it is, if you like it, if you're down with this. Ooh, I triggered fireworks. That's interesting. Don't know how I did. I'm going to do it again sometime.
That'll work for me.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go through that, and we'll use Pomodoro timers, because if we don't use timers, and I'm a very bad timer keeper when I'm the one doing the work, feel free to work on your portfolio at the exact same time. Some people find some good joy in that. We'll hash out a bit of a quick plan, though, of course, and we'll stick to timers for that. Okay, so I'll reshare my screen again, and we'll go over the plan today, and we'll chuck some time definitions on those. Okay, we're back on our Figma board. Let's put a little bit of a plan together, or else we kind of end up a bit messy. So this was yesterday's schedule that we worked on. Well, not yesterday, it's the other day's schedule when we were getting our first draft. But let's work on a new schedule. Okay, so we're going to spend we're going to try doing a really quick fire, high level, shitty first draft of the hero case study. So we're going to limit it to 10 minutes. We go 15 minutes because I actually always underestimate. So we're going to work on the hero case study. Then spend, if possible, maybe even a 10-minute go at the supporting case studies. And we're also going to, after the first hero case study, we're going to do a very quick 5-minute critique. So we're switching from our writing mindset of where we're just trying to put content in to a very quick editing mindset of, okay, let's, where are the gaps? What do we hate most is how I'm going to phrase that. We'll do another, maybe a quick fire 10-minute hero case study. We might revise this if we're like, okay, we really want to focus on a very specific section. And we'll probably get blocked at an area and we'll keep an eye out for that. We might get blocked at a point where perhaps I haven't put enough thought, I haven't spent long enough in this, where we might need feedback. So I may call on you guys perhaps at some point to critique this case study. We'll see how we go at the 5-minute mark for this 5-minute critique, and maybe we'll do some live feedback and you can tell me what sucks the most. If not, we can always reserve it for another critique format if that's what we need. Okay, so that's our plan for today, 15 minutes on the hero case study. And if I was to try and break that down even more, just as an exercise here, I'd really want to spend the first 5 to 10 minutes on the first 3 to 4 slides. So making sure that the problem definition that we're working on is super clear. If we were to get a bit more specific. Okay, let's chuck a timer on for the first 15 minutes, and we're going to work through this. Timer, give me a timer. But it's not liking me right now, so I'm going to have to stop sharing, start the timer, and then keep sharing. We can do that. Okay, so we're going to do 15 minutes on the clock. Some jazzy music on. Maybe not jazzy music. I think that'll disrupt the thinking patterns a bit too much. Go with the AJ and Smarts workshop format. Okay, cool. Let's get into it. Enough talking. Well, there'll be plenty of talking, but enough planning. Okay, let's take a look. We're going to start with our hero case study, and I'm going to start very first and foremost with the title, purely because once I have some pictures, it kind of makes things a lot easier for me. So we're going to do a really rough draft of this whole thing. It's not going to be the perfect case study that we want, but it's going to be a good start. What we're missing right now is a bit of a look at what's the end-to-end case study we're trying to communicate here. I'm going to fill in the gaps and stick strictly to this template for now, and then we'll expand upon it. If I could fit the entire thing in just this, that would be amazing. If not, chances are we'll probably need an extra slide or two. So let's do that now. Okay, the title here. Now I want this title to ideally be what we call a narrative title rather than functional. So I would love for it to communicate kind of the core of what we're doing here for the design system here. But for now, I'm going to just use the company name. I'm normally not a fan of using that, but I'm going to give it a go. Even though I really don't like doing that, but we need a rough draft, not a perfect draft. So that's our really big, it's really important that we go for something rough rather than trying to edit now. That writing and editing mindset is what we've talked about. Now, we're not revitalizing a beloved motorcycle company, though that sounds super fun. And I would love that. But we're going to go. Now, this is always hard for, especially, I always find this really hard for this one because we're working with an internal project. And internal projects really, it's so easy to think about what we're doing internally, but not externally in terms of the impact to users. So the focus of this case study, and I think as we did in our brief storyboarding, there's a few things going on here. We're helping evolve the product development team. We're also making the product more scalable, more user-friendly. We're also dealing with creating a whole range of services. So an important thing about this product is it's not just a single product. It's made of smaller services and flows. So it's really this big monolithic product full of many different features and many different services. So let's see if we can come up with a subtitle that's representative of those two things. And what we'll come up with will probably be terrible, but that's okay. First draft is what we're going for. So I'm going to say, I'm going to use the word, I'm going to use a word I don't like using, but it's going to be empowering. So we want to say dot points because I like dot points. Kind of uplifting, maybe revitalizing. Stole that from the recent sentence. The product development process. This isn't really user-centric. It's way too generic, but we're not critiquing right now. But we're also kind of building a system for a like a multi-product. Sure what you call government services. It's like a hub, I guess, for a hub for aviation, because we deal with all aviation services. So building if I was to use words around, listen, we're making it more scalable, we're making it more friendly. That's a terrible word, but I'm trying not to edit. We got to write, not edit. Building a scalable hub for aviation services. That's specific. So really what we're after here is not comprehensive, but we want something that's high enough a level that communicates most of what this case study is about. But more importantly is specific, not detailed, but specific. Now, scalable hub for aviation services is pretty decent. That's okay. I'm going to stick to dot points despite it just because it really works with the way my brain works. The last element is I am going to jump over to Google and I'm going to ask Google, why are design systems important? Now, I've written many articles about design systems, and I'm more of looking up this to save my brain the time of having to process this myself because I don't want to. It's pretty early in the morning. I'm not stealing all of this, but we are going to add some text underneath each one. These are going to be our notes. So you can consider this almost like when we were doing storyboards. For those who have done storyboards, we're going to have some notes underneath. And this is just going to be what we're trying to communicate or some references that maybe we can use when trying to make really nice, short, succinct sentences here. So I find that really useful. So if I was to define design systems, and I've just taken TopTal's description, that's how I would decide it. If we weren't on time limitations, what I would do is instead probably grab some Post-it notes and just do it myself. But there are some good things. We've used the word scalable here, and that's kind of good because we can see we've also got some descriptions around design decisions, scale, customer experience, etc. So that's in line with what we were thinking. So it's good to have as a reference. And I'm going to also just put consistent, scalable, unified brand experience. So that's also something we're working on. That's going to be good enough. We've got some lovely tags here. So let's add one for design system. Love using tags. Always makes me happy. And we're not doing locations, so we could just say maybe government. Doing it. Okay, now if I have to choose one of these sentences temporarily, I think it would be the building a scalable hub for aviation services. It's still too generic and corporate-y to me, but we're going to keep that, and we'll move our other two into here, into our notes. Okay, cool. Now, what about our picture here? Even though we're in writing mindset, I want to change these pictures just to something a little more thematic, and I'm going to use stock pictures just for now. So let's find some stock pictures, and we're going to use the plugin Pexels. How are we doing on our timer? 7 minutes. Oh, lovely. We are definitely not on time. Let's look for something generic to aviation. Ooh, I like this. Even though I'm not working on actual design of aviation systems, I'm going to just use this because I like it. And then we'll find maybe a more appropriate picture. I'm very much for trying to show real pictures of kind of people over artifacts, unless I really need to show the artifact for some reason, or it's a really good artifact. So I'm going to use pictures that are themed around my case study first, and then I'll expand upon them with my my actual artifact pictures. So artifact pictures are going to be probably one of my last things. Also just going to group these together. Okay, we don't really need multi-page case study here. There's probably more info we can have, but this is nice and simple. I might just change this to case study number 1. Yeah, that's pretty good there. Let's move on to the next ones. Let's make some space and some room. Focusing on the cover kind of puts a lot of really big thinking, big picture thoughts. So I like to start there, and I find that really helps me later on be like, okay, have I communicated the breadth of what I'm after? Let's create some more note spaces because we might need to chuck some extra content underneath. And that's my way of being able to be in a bit of a writer's mindset while also still keeping things clear and succinct. When I try and use the template as the note taking, you end up with long essays. So I kind of like to separate the two. And you'll notice I've kind of switched into the editor's mindset right at the end and just been like, okay, this one over that one. So, okay, according to our original storyboard, we also needed to introduce the company somehow. So if I was to expand upon this, really, what do people need to know about the company in order to understand the product, and everything else? Well, I think they need to kind of know just that we provide a variety of services, because that's kind of the most relevant part here. So I think they need to know who CASA is, and CASA is the company I work for, and what they do, how it relates to the product, which we'll introduce next. That's kind of really the core things. If you can't really know the product if you don't know the company that owns the product and why they exist. So thankfully, I kind of know this one. We kind of provide aviation services to the industry, I guess, to the industry. That's a really broad way of putting it, but we'll keep that for now. I'm going to use these to define some of the core services we can't, just to give people an idea of here's what we do. So maybe we do licensing. Still haven't mentioned who CASA is, but this is kind of what the providing aviation services to the industry is. And each of these hopefully will provide a little bit of insight into what that looks like. This is definitely not going to be perfect, this case study. We're looking at getting, here's the concepts that we want to communicate throughout it, and here's how each slide helps each other. So that's what we're going for. I should know more what we do. We do licensing. Let's just say we also do medical stuff. I think that's vaguely important. We also do, let's go registration. Let's go aircraft. That's looking for kind of the big words that kind of communicate the kind of biggest stuff we do. And recreation. So we kind of do people who are flying drones and stuff. We do kind of big pilots and all that. We do licensing is a very important part. And medical is also another part in terms of but I'm going to remove that because we also do policy. That's a very big, we make laws, which is intriguing. Okay, that's going to be good enough. I'm going to turn this to civil aviation. Be way more perfect, but it at least communicates roughly the core things we do. So that's going to be, let's get some more stock pictures. Licenses. Driving license. I have pictures of pilot's license, so I can actually bring that in, but I'm not going to do that. Do they have a nice stock picture for policy? I think time's almost up, so we'll do a reset in a second. I mean, they've got generic things. I might just leave the stock images for this one. But we will add an airplane. Got to at least have one airplane in this. Go. This one. Why not? Sorry, dog. You are being replaced by planes. Now, I'm using these templates as a starting point. In reality, chances are there's many different ways I could probably do this. For example, I could have a big picture on the side like this one and kind of step through the kind of core features. I might have more than one slide here that kind of talks a bit more in depth about what we do and who we are. I might even go to the company that I work for's yearly plan or some of their online websites and take some of the wording from that. So just as a quick example of what that might look like. Typically, the companies we work for have spent time crafting words that work. So actually having some of our words in line with that can be super useful. So this is the company I work for, or the government I work for. They said Pilot Safety Hub. That's a pretty useful way of looking at it. If I go to our actual product, there's actually wording in there I could probably steal. Okay, no, yes, I designed that. Excellent. Big redesign project right now for this whole front page. So that's going to be interesting. Maybe I'll do a public critique if people want to do a critique of actual real services. Let's see, you can access services here. Does it give me... okay, there's not much data I could use here, but if there was pages on the website for this product, I could probably use them to grab some wording from as well and use that in terms of what I've got. The About Us pages for most companies are super useful. Maybe we're all about aviation safety. We are a government body that licenses pilots, registers aircraft, and oversees and promotes safety. I could just take that. That would work. Okay, so that's a company. Took some just extra time. I'm going to do an extra 2 minutes on the next one, and then we'll check in. Okay, now we got to introduce the product. And that's what I'm going to do here. Now, it's a little easier for my government work because when it comes to government, digital is all about kind of delivering new ways of doing services. So I'm going to give that a go here. Now, I definitely feel like I'm going to need an extra slide, so I'm just going to add one anyway. So I think today we'll do 2 more slides, and then we'll look at, can we get some pictures, and then we'll do kind of a critique of it. Okay, so what do I need to do here? I've introduced kind of the company. Now, I could probably update this to be like digital aviation services. That way I'm kind of introducing the company and the product at the exact same time. But we're going to keep them separate temporarily now. And I'm going to jump straight over to the website we are on. And I'm going to use this as our kind of stock image. That way it kind of just shows a bit of what the product looks like. It looks real. I have these designs on Figma, so I could have just actually taken that. I'm starting with pictures just because I find that really sets a scene for me. Kind of gives me something visual to go off. Okay, that's a terrible picture, but we're going to leave that there despite it being pretty bad. Okay, we're not detailing... Oh, maybe we are detailing users. We're not going to detail users here. So now we're like, okay, what is the point of my product? Why does it exist? And for us, it's really about delivering those services in a more modern way. It's more accessible. It's people can access it 24/7. We can deliver them faster, stronger, etc. It's overall just a better experience when you want to get things done in aviation. So I'm going to use something really corny and go the future of digital aviation. Really corny, but we're going to use it anyway. Now, there's some unique aspects to this product in the sense that there's things that you can do digitally that you can't do if you weren't using a digital product, which I think is a great focus for highlighting why it's different from just doing everything through paper. So there's a few things around why this product is important. For one thing, it's kind of 24-hour accessibility. This is kind of the outcomes what the users like a lot, at least. It's way faster, so it's kind of instant, so to speak. Instead of taking weeks, it takes, in some cases, hours or minutes. It also has a ton of stuff. This is just my notes that you can't really do. Like, there's digital licenses. You can't have a digital license without the digital. That's definitely something useful. It's also overall better user experience because we can tweak and personalize. Okay, and something missing here is there's a lot missing from this. For example, I'm just doing super high level. Some context around this product. It's part of a, CASA is a traditional, very, very traditional company. And we're talking about kind of what are the problems or the context behind the company. I've gone really surface level. So they're super traditional. So everything was quite old school. It was very risk averse. They were all about risk. Aversion, obviously, planes falling from the sky, don't want happening. And so this has also really represented a big digital transformation for them. Completely new way of working. And it's really a major step in modernizing the regulator, so to speak. That's a pretty good way of putting it, actually. So there's a few interesting notes here, and there is some stuff we want to communicate. We do kind of want to communicate the kind of traditional nature of CASA. So we probably won't. We're going to revise this one definitely. I'm about to enter critique mode in a second, so I'm going to shift on first before we get too deep. In terms of the design system, this is kind of it. We're stuck in a few different places, and this is going to be a rough draft. This is the product. Now, there's two users we're looking for. Let's get the notes out for that. We need to communicate two things. One is the status of the design team, the design system is being built for, and the second is also the state of the product. I'm going to call it. And so the design team, very old school way of working. They're using HTML, CSS. If any designer hears that, they're always like, wow, they were working really old school. So there's a slight wow factor that I think works quite well. And we'll pause in just a minute. We'll get these notes out first. State of the product, the branding inconsistencies. The website and the product look different. You can actually see that. So if you look at the way this is designed, it looks very different to the way this is designed. We are about to relaunch that, which is exciting. The branding inconsistency, we also have the scale feature of the product. And general, I'm just going to put user experience. We also have really slow loading times and some architecture stuff that is starting to really impact the user experience. And we can also say there's also call center inquiries. Help with improvements here. And lastly, for the design team, there's also stuff around, I guess, that backlog, not knowing what to design and when. Okay, those are our notes. Okay, definitely unsatisfied with a lot of this. We'll switch into critique mode in a second, but I want to just stop and pause and see how people are doing. How is everyone? Is this useful? Is it going too much into detail? Is it a bit too niche on the product that I'm working with? Or am I talking high level enough where it's kind of helping you see the thinking? Do you want me to continue? Thumbs up if that's a yes.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for
Tawfiq.
sharing. I mean, it's interesting to hear your brain in a way, like walking through what's happening. This gives a primer to the context of what you've been up to so far. Really looking forward, like how are you going to translate into minimal slides in ability to communicate what you've been doing. So, so far so good. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Tawfiq. Appreciate the feedback. Anyone else? Anyone have questions? Anna?
No, I was just gonna say that this is great, like exactly what Tawfiq said, but also just like kind of the way that you're breaking down like the last few bullets that you put together of like the things that you wanted to focus on as far as the transformation. I think that's like a really good short list to kind of stay focused. So
yeah, and I think doing those notes and doing the dot points are super useful. Ideally, I probably would have done them beforehand and done the notes underneath on what I want to communicate and then started work on them. It's tempting to just jump straight in. Tawfiq, I think you've got your hand up for a question.
Oh, yeah. So just out of curiosity, Ben, like, am I audible?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So are you thinking for the job you want to get, like what do you want to include here, or you're drafting the initial draft and
really good case study, really good question. So I'm gonna let's actually go over that now because I think that's important. And before this, it's always important to set the scene. And obviously, I haven't done that. I've just dived right in. So I'm sharing my screen just so I can kind of go over that question. So if I go back to let's go back to our plan a little. Now, for a design system case study, really for me, that's targeting senior designer and UX roles, UI roles. At the senior level, what I want to communicate is twofold. I want to communicate both the outcomes of the design system, the scale of the work. So I'm not just doing small designs here. We're doing big systems of work here. It's kind of comprehensive. So it's not just kind of a few small designs. It's a big piece of work. So I want to include the outcomes, the impact on the design team. I also really want to just at least communicate at some point the larger product strategy somehow. I really want strategy and outcomes to be present in this case study. So not just to be about how I design components. So what I don't want to focus on, I don't want the emphasis to be on component design, really like nitty gritty UI. That's not really, when you hit the senior UX roles, it's not really what it's about. It's definitely a core part of the day-to-day, but it's really like, what's the next step up on why does the UX UI matter? So that's really what I want to talk about. So I also want to talk about and under the outcomes of the design system, actually, let's work on these questions right now. So I want to talk about the total system itself. So that means the kind of services design. These are kind of more outcomes things here. I want to talk about from the impact of the design team. Talk about ideally kind of the speed of design now, the daily usage, because I'm not looking at detailing the process that much. If we do process at all, it would probably be like a single slide. Really what we want on this is to have really good, the kind of focus of this short case study is process is pretty minimal. We really want to focus on the kind of business, the opportunity, impact, the core user problems, the really kind of big why. and really hone in on the solution and outcomes, really give some way more life to that versus our resume. Our resume just has like 4 dot points on it, but think of this as like a middle ground between the detail and the resume, where I'm giving a bit more insight into why those outcomes really matter. So for the senior UX roles, yeah, we're looking at outcomes, strategy, as well as kind of leadership, are kind of the emphasis. That makes sense? Does that help? Taufik?
Yeah, yes, man. Yes, man. Thanks for
Cool.
sharing on that. Would you include about the team as well? Like,
I think I definitely would include the team, but I include the business opportunity, and the kind of the team and the business opportunity feel to me like they go together. I feel like there's also, because we've got the business opportunity from the product lens, but then a business opportunity from the people lens, or the team and systems lens. So I think there's 2 there that can fit together, and I definitely want to at least include at least a note somewhere about the team. And maybe I will decide not to. Maybe that is actually a thing. I would like to include it just because I think it really gives you a great insight into how we were doing things beforehand. But we may discover that perhaps that's an interview detail here. Maybe that's too detailed. And what we're doing with these here is we're looking at trying to get the breadth of our case study, and then slowly make it more specific, more detailed. Look for what messaging doesn't exist in this. So we're starting as broad, and we're slowly drilling down until we find just the right balance of specificity that works for this case study without it being an overwhelming. So we still have the clarity, but then we also have just the right amount of detail. Is that good?
sounds good. Sounds good. Thanks.
Cool. Any other questions? Cool. Okay. Let's switch to maybe critique mode here. There's a few things I want to do. I want to just drag in some real pictures, just because it really helps my brain be like, oh yeah, this is real, which will, I think, help. I can then see how maybe this template won't work the way it is. Maybe there needs to be some of these slides in between. What I'm after is, what is the flow from start to finish, and does it make sense? So if we've gone Civil Aviation Safety Authority, building a scalable hub for aviation services. Now, critiquing those first 2, we're kind of seeing the same thing. You already know what we're about. If I actually look at the cover, you're saying we have a hub for aviation services. So in reality, we don't need to say providing aviation services to the industry. You already know from this. So as part of a critique goes right now, that is redundant. So this needs to be something else. And so we just talked about the digital transformation. So maybe that is the focus here. It's like, hey, here's maybe the product has to go in here. Instead, it might be around CAS is a traditional company. It's over 100 years old, I think, or not over 100 years. It's like 50, 60 years old at least. So we want to kind of communicate maybe the current state. Might be a good thing to do here. So I'm going to work with the notes here, and we're just aiming to critique for now. So, okay, this one is a bit not good enough, so to speak. I'm going to shift our product maybe over here and see whether or not that flows well. So I'm going to now delete most of what we've done. Actually, let me just grab this. I'm going to move that over. Right now, I'm just testing for fit, and I'm going to be focusing on the first 2. And I might grab some pictures as well, just to make this feel more real. Okay, now just a quick critique on these 2. The template of the slide looks very similar, so that you actually don't know which this is meant to be a cover, whereas this isn't a cover. So it's actually kind of confusing having these 2 side by side. So I'm just going to make some modifications. Now we're going to actually shift the whole thing out, and I'm just going to stick with this slide for now. Okay. So let's get 2 slides that talk about the team and the product. Now, frequently when doing slide decks like this, what you'll find is you'll expand it and you'll end up with something a little too long. But it's okay to go a little long as afterwards you see how can I make this more succinct. So just to show you what I mean by that is frequently I'm aiming for clarity. Clarity is the most important thing. And if I have to make a ton of slides to get that clarity, that's okay. I can always cut them back later. So maybe I might have something like this where we have, first we talk about the design team maybe goes here. I'm just putting some notes in. Then we'll talk about the kind of state of the product here. And I'm going to move this down now because we go state of the product here, the design team impact here, because what I want to, the most important thing to be clear on is the problem and the business opportunity. Now, if I spend 80% of my time on that, great. No problem at all. Okay, so we've got the design team is what we're going to talk about here. We'll make that slide relevant to that. We have the main title here. We've got the future of digital aviation. Let's see, what else did we come up with? Kind of following our storyboarding by the look of it. I'm blanking on one of the notes we had. State of the product, design team. There was something else, wasn't there? Yes, the kind of old school way of working for CASA. Okay, so then like a big narrative, we've said, here's the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, and this case study is focused around building a scalable hub. Now, we're looking at the future of digital aviation here to be a bit more specific, talking about kind of the product we're dealing with. So this would be my CASA. So we're introducing the product here because we've probably introduced this whole cover slide kind of introduces the company and the case study at the exact same time, which is quite useful. So I'm actually really digging this cover slide. It's doing what I need it to do. We're then going to introduce kind of the concept of the product and what it means to deliver digital services. But they're going to talk about maybe the problems of the kind of the more business problem here. So we're going to talk about the aversion to risk, the kind of old school elements, just to give people a sense of how the organization is. Then we're going to talk about the kind of maybe the state of the design team. So kind of working in HTML and CSS. I'll try and then talk about the state of the product. This is feeling inconsistent. I can feel some friction as we've gone from some concept to concept. So that's telling us that definitely as we figure this out, there's going to be changes we're going to make. Then we'll talk about kind of the state of the product and the big problems there. Then after we've managed to get the problems, the state of the company, all of that really tight, then people will understand what's at stake. They'll understand what we're working with in terms of launching into the case study. And then we could start showcasing the main solutions here. We're going to skip process for now. We can always fill process back in later. Now, what's missing from this case study here is I'm looking at the end-to-end, is we are missing some kind of slide that's going to help me talk about outcomes. For the design system, we have really good metrics for the outcomes. So I want to highlight that. So to get that, let's go back to our perfect slide deck canvas thing. Template, and we're going to steal some more from that. Okay, I'm going to take from the interview deck just because there's some good templates on that. And I'm going to take this one just because I like it. And I like pictures, so we're going to have at least 2, let's go 3 big pictures, and then the outcome slide after it. Okay, so company, some information about the company in terms of where it's at, in terms of the struggle. This is, I've just entered CASA. Here's what it looks like. Here's the state of the design team, the state of the product. Now we're going to draft the future. So we got kind of the current state, and now we've got the future state is the solution and outcome. So let's grab some cool pictures. Let's do that. That would be nice. I would like something visual, and then we'll do a quick pause. Now I do have pictures somewhere in my Notion. I'm pretty sure it's in the, let's go back to my Notion and we'll go to the career. I think I've been trying to build this thing out. So design system, did I put pictures in here? Yes, I did. Excellent. Okay, these are pictures from the actual design system. So let's see if I've captured any cool ones. I did. The great thing about Figma, if you're ever having to do a design system stuff, you can actually pull metrics from Figma itself. So that's very cool. I'm going to do that. I'm going to chuck it over. Oh, I can't copy and paste. That's okay. Well, we'll download all these pictures and we're going to drop them in and see maybe we can put them somewhere else. Figma metrics picture. Showing breakdown of all of our components. So components shot. This was a live call showcasing a prototype made with the design system. So live call, I think that's pretty good. We got some kind of innovation recognition and a star. That feels like I'm in kindergarten. I've also captured, and I normally didn't do anything like this, also captured a detailed breakdown of the different stages of our design system. So we don't always have this, but oh, I like that picture. That would be a good picture. But we're going to take that. And I can grab way more, but for now, we'll go with what we've got. I'm going to steal some of these pictures, and I've got way better ones, I think, in the real Figma, but we're going to just use these as placeholders. Okay, this one is going to showcase the design system itself. So the first one will showcase the design system itself. And we're going to showcase the sidebar, or no, I don't like that. We're going to showcase all the components here. So I'm going to grab pictures of all the components and put them on here. Also chuck documentation if possible. I want to make a nice thing where it's tons of components on the right, but then you can also see all the work we've done, because a design system is more than just the components. It's all the documentation. It's the design decisions. So maybe that can be the next slide. So design decisions. These aren't going to be the most perfect pictures, because ideally we want to showcase beyond the design system as we've talked about. And this can be maybe live services designed. So wireframes. And we go into the metrics. Now, something missing here is we talked about that for this role, I really wanted to highlight the leadership, the outcomes, and the strategy. We just wrote down small things, but we didn't really write down any of the strategy. So let's just quickly dot point what that could look like. In that big text, please. So in terms of how would we showcase the strategy side of things when we get to the solution? Well, any kind of team training, kind of handbooks, it being used, any kind of backlog UX, like UX backlog work that is more focused around how we do work. So if I can showcase any of that, which I do have the UX backlog, I have a picture of that. Kind of total services or total work being done works really well. So that's going to start communicating kind of the big picture thing, big picture outcome and strategy there. I was hoping we'd have something sendable, but this is looking not sendable at all. But we do have a bit more of a detailed rundown of what we're dealing with. So where's weakest? Okay, so we have a bit of a understanding of the pictures we've got. We've got a bit of an understanding of what can go in here, so we can at least showcase the design system. And for the first version of this, it's not going to be perfect. I need something to send. So as long as I've got good metrics, I've got good pictures that kind of highlight what I've done and just really good in general, we have enough of an insight into the core problem. I think that is going to be enough to send. I don't think we need anything more than that. And I can always cut this down bare minimum. I can always remove some of these slides. So maybe it's just 6 slides and it's okay slides. So I might focus on that. I'm going to do a quick pause. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab metrics, chuck them in there. We're going to focus on the first 2 slides and get those done if possible. Okay, I'm going to do a quick pause for any questions on this one. This is definitely requiring more brain work.
Yeah, that structure is really helpful to see. Just the pacing of like the upfront, like the before and after, kind of separated with those like, beautiful images from like the actual product, and then kind of going into metrics. And I was wondering what you might, I think we've talked about this before, but like if you didn't have, solid metrics to kind of pull from, what would you put in that last slide where you're kind of like rounding everything up?
So you can leave metrics completely out of this. The only reason I'm putting it in is because I just so happen to have them. So for me, this would be focused on, if you've got the really strong clarity at the start, then that's honestly the best thing you can do. In terms of showcasing outcomes, you can just show really good pictures of the solution in here. If you really want to showcase metrics, really what we're after is evidence that you did something and it made a change. That could be anything. It could be user quotes. Pictures are a form of evidence. It shows, hey, this thing actually happened. Videos of, or like numbers around, here's the user testing we did, here's the anything you did. What you're after is evidence, not necessarily super clear UX outcome metrics. Obviously, having them is really useful and it's great to have, but maybe put a lens on it, on like, what evidence do I have to show that something happened, that after I've done all my design work, there's something there. Maybe it is just pictures. We often recommend people sometimes talk about what metrics they would have measured. You can also talk about what is going to happen in the future. So maybe it's like, oh, in the future, we're actually going to go down the line and develop these 7 services. We're going to start looking at these metrics here. So our work always continues after us. So that can also be a good way to showcase more things rather than just, here's the solution, here's a product I designed, done. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, in this case that I'm thinking about, I had left the company before like being able to actually see the turnaround or like metrics of like what we had done. But there were a few campaigns that happened after I left. Would kind of referring to those campaigns in relationship to the work that I had done be something that you would do?
Did your work influence those campaigns?
Yeah, I guess that's the way of like kind of articulating that. And even something like that, or testimonials from the people.
Hell yeah, testimonials.
That sort of thing. Okay.
Definitely.
Cool.
Because we're looking for evidence here, and the more evidence, the clearer. There's numbers people, and then there's quotation people. Like people can say, "Oh, cool, you got 20% more of a something," but show me people actually enjoyed it. Then you're like, okay, now I need qualitative metrics as well. So yeah, it's at least especially in the capabilities deck, it's very much a what evidence can I show? Because you've still got the interview, and you can go into more detail there. You can craft the messaging way more clearer. This is really just a bit of a highlight reel look. It's a bit more detail. Yeah, I'm including outcomes here just because for a design system, I've got them. Maybe I'll actually even remove them. I'm going to keep them in for now, but I might decide to remove them just because, again, yeah, it is a capabilities deck. It doesn't need to be super detailed. And especially when we draft these for the first time, no matter who it is, we always go too much detail. It always happens. Just because we're in the process of trying to figure out our own mind, our clarity, our work, what's important, what's not. You can see as we went through those notes, we started off really surface level. We found things that were maybe actually a bit more important. Yeah.
Right. And so like what you are working on now is like the hero case study from your capabilities deck.
Yeah. So this is a hero case study. This is not for an interview. I wouldn't walk through this in an interview. This is for me to send as my portfolio, not a website. I don't have one. My domain name was stolen. Not going back on that.
Right. Okay.
But this is something for me to send for their hiring team and then their design teams to look at.
Okay.
Yeah. Submit.
Actually, you answered my question. What I was going to ask was, is there a way to show like what your future kind of work might look like? Because I've seen that previously, and yeah, I was just kind of thinking because sometimes you don't get the ideal
Mm.
kind of outcome. Like, for example, in my past, what has happened is the dev team and the product team had to kind of trim back on the delivered solution. So it sometimes doesn't maybe present your work in the best light. So I was going to ask, like, can we show what our ideal designs and ideal outcomes were?
So if someone gave me a case study that looks perfect, I would be highly suspicious.
Right. Yeah.
Just because it's never perfect. Like I've never met a person who's had a design process that's gone brilliantly, exactly what they wanted. So like when we say, you know, we often say like, oh, they didn't actually deliver all of our features. It's like, cool, that's not actually the point of our design. Like our goal is to get it to a better place than it would have been without us there. The more perfect, the better we can get that, of course, awesome. The better user experience we can make, great. But the fact that we got to the end and we actually came out with something, we came out with features, feature lists, you know, they developed some of our stuff. That's great. They just changed the priority on the fly, and that's okay. It happens all the time. But you did get something. So that's awesome. That's what we wanted. We want to be able to go from really ambiguity to delivering something as a product. You can always deliver the rest later.
I know that just to build on that, like in my particular experience, the visual fidelity kind of often took a back seat. And as a design team, we were working on building out a design system, and the development cycles were often taking too long. So that's why they would then rush the design team to say, you know what, let's cut the corners and let's just get something out there. And then we'll work on the visual fidelity, of course.
Designers can always design faster than they frequently develop, I find, unless you have a massive development team.
Right.
The backlog just grows. Like I've never met a team that can design, that the design and development teams work at like the exact same pace. It's like we can always churn out way more and come up with way more ideas in a 20-minute session than they could make.
Right.
Yeah,
sorry, I was going to say, like in my past interviewing experience, what I found was sometimes I think visually, like my past work or like the company product doesn't necessarily present so well because it's not a beautiful product, I'll say.
So what I would say there, just one note on that, is that's why we focus so strongly on the business opportunity and the user problem, because no one's ever solving someone to make something pretty. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter how pretty it is. So by having a super compelling and clear problem and being like, we solved this problem, that's what you're being hired for. And I prefer to emphasize that, because the portal that we design, it's not pretty by any, it's forms. It's mostly all digital forms. When you look at most of our products, that's what it is. And yeah, that's why we focus on, like, our job is to solve problems and create a great user experience. And it doesn't need to look pretty to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I would say focus on clarity over that. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Paulina, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. I mean, this question is probably simple, and I know that you are in the process, but do you have like an idea of how many pages you're going to produce? Because I am asking this question because I know, of course, it depends on the position you're applying, but in most of the cases, you have this like probably.
I want 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 is ideal. Like any more, I don't like. I do find the way I frequently have to do that is I have to expand it to 8 to 10 and then start culling
Content. Okay.
So that's what I find is I'm like, okay, my maximum for a working draft is 10. And then my goal is, okay, I need to get this down to 5 or 6. What can I cut? What can I merge together? And that's, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But is it about just one case or the whole portfolio?
Oh, sorry. So for this case study, 5 or 6, I want at least 2 slides for my introduction. Just gives me enough space to be like, hey, I'm a unique person. Here's what's different about me. And then I want 2 pages of a supporting case study at the end. That way, if the hero case study is not enough, here's a quick slam of 2 pieces of work, and then that's it. I might try and add something at the end of it just because I like to keep things a little quirky. if I can add something about, oh, here's also like a surprise at the end, that would be cool. I like giving people surprises, but bare minimum, that would be it. And then I'll just close it there with a nice thank you slide. That's it, done and dusted. Nice and easy for them. They don't have to think much. It's all there and prepped. Make their job easy, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think total that would be, if I assumed I got the hero case study down to my ideal of 6, that would be what? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, probably around about 12 slides. That's pretty good, I think, if you can get the whole thing down to 12 slides. Yeah.
Okay.
If I could go
Okay. So
shorter,
that was my question. Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, if you have any comments or if anyone wants to push back on anything, that's my favorite thing. So feel free.
Quick question about that. So, sorry, is this the deck that you would also use in an interview?
For me and CJ, I think will attest to this, especially when you get to the senior level. I find people use decks less and less. They use decks for this. Maybe they do use one for an interview. It really depends on how you want to approach this in your own style and the kind of area you're working. I would use an interview deck. However, for me, due to the roles I'm applying for and my personal interview style, I don't really use decks. What I do is I might have a few artifacts on call that I can call up, and I style it as a conversation. That's how I personally work, and it works really well for the field I'm in. It doesn't work for everyone, of course. But my next step after this would be to build an interview deck if I was doing that. Many people build an interview deck and don't use it, which is okay because they build the interview deck as a way to prep for the interview. At that stage, you know that your work's so good you won't even need the slides. Yeah. In terms of that, oh yep, someone had.
I was gonna ask, is that something that you're thinking about, like kind of hosting in the future? Is kind of looking at what you might have in an interview deck versus like if you didn't have a deck, like how would you kind of go through that?
Yeah, so we can do something like that. It's definitely an interesting question. I feel like CJ, you and I would have a lot to discuss because you don't have you made an interview deck, but you don't really use it. You also are a conversationalist, is the way I would put it. Yeah, so we can definitely do something in terms of like how they differ. I pretty much in interviews ask a massive ton of questions. I have a pretty common the very first question most people ask you in an interview is like, tell me about yourself. And if I had an interview deck, chances are the things I would say would be almost exactly the same. If I'm presenting during an interview, I don't want it going over 20 minutes. 20 minutes is still a lot. 15 minutes would be preferred. Everyone loses focus after 20 minutes. Like, an hour presentation is enough. This is enough as it is. But if you're in an interview, I try and keep it short, sweet, and simple, and then start using questions as a way to conversationally talk about the role, talk about my role, talk about what they're looking for, and then talk about how maybe some of my past experience connects with what they're looking for. If there's something that doesn't work, I might even talk about that. I often have a ton of questions I ask, like in terms of like for the next 12 months, like what is their biggest project or biggest focus at the moment, to kind of get an understanding of the company, get an understanding of the role, get an understanding of why they were there. I also like to ask why they joined. It's always a fun question, in my opinion. Yeah.
That would be really great to kind of have a session for.
Definitely. Yeah, we can definitely do something like that. It does depend also on like the type of interview, the kind of company you're interviewing for, and also the culture you're in as well. We're very conversational here, so it's very rare you have formal interviews. I did have a formal interview for the role I'm in currently, and I had just like 3 slides to showcase some of my work, and I just talked about the work and how we got to it. Kind of how I've done verbally. Imagine there's no slides there, and imagine the words are clearer. Yeah. Cool. I also have read like tons of books on like negotiation and sales. And so I often employ a lot of that during my interviews. It's actually very useful. It's like you're hashing out, trying to get to a negotiation. I like to also ask like frequently, I try and ask questions where it makes them think, oh, I can imagine you in this role. So that way they kind of in their brain have already kind of put me in the role at that point. I think one of my favorites is asking, if I was in this role in about 6 months and I was wildly successful, what would I have done? That way they tell me what I need to do, which is kind of useful. Yeah. Okay. Now, where are we at? We've gotten a bit more of a longer case study. We've kind of looked at the core themes. There's still a lot of work to be done here. Now, finding the clarity of that messaging is going to be a hell of a brain process. In many cases, when we work with designers on one-on-ones, it's this back and forth. It's having someone there to talk back to you around, here's what you said the real problem is. That helps bring a lot of clarity. We don't have that as much here, but it can be a bit of a conversation. So we have reached time, and I don't want to take this too far over. I also have to go head out to the office for CASA now as well and spend the next 6 hours working on design system documentation. Hooray. But we're going to do another one of these. And I think the next one will be hyper-focused on finalizing those slides. I think it's murky right now, and there's a bit of an arc. You find when you do writing or when you do this, there's this arc of like murkiness, uncertain, brain power, stress. And then once you push through that kind of that peak of struggle, the clarity starts to come through. And the core part is to keep working through that peak. And then eventually kind of starts to, okay, yep, I understand now. So also going away for a day and coming back to it with fresh eyes can help. So in the next session, what we'll do is we'll actually take a critique approach first. Before jumping in, we'll actually spend the first 10 to 15 minutes being, okay, what's wrong with this and what's missing? And then we'll talk through, okay, what's the most important point? So there's a few exercises we can do that help with that. Really gets the brain going. It kind of hurts to do, but I think that'll be the next session. And that should hopefully round off a decent draft of the first case study. A sendable draft is what we'll do. Okay. Well, I hope that's been useful. It's the first time I've gone through a capabilities deck like this. I frequently just send my resume, and I actually did have an old version of the capabilities deck. Now that I think about it, I didn't think of it that way. I do have an old portfolio that now that I look back, it is actually a capabilities deck. It has like 4 slides per case study. And then that was kind of it. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, guys, without further ado, I will see you guys next time. I will schedule an event. It might be quite soon just because I do have to get something out. So you may see it pop up in like 2-3 days. It might be really soon. And if you can join, cool. If you can't, that's okay. These are recorded. Yeah. Please have a good day. If you have any questions, please let me know. This has been, I think, as interesting for me. It's been a learning experience for me as well. I look forward to getting this done and not having to deal with it. I think like all of us. Cool.
Okay, thanks.
Bye, guys. Have a good day. Get some sun.
Excellent.
Have some food.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.